Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep, really deep, into a story that feels like it's straight out of a psychological thriller.
It does, doesn't it? We're calling it the Hans Smedema affair.
Right, we've got personal accounts, court documents, blog posts, even all about this guy, Hans Smedema, who was absolutely convinced he was caught up in this massive conspiracy.
Oh, yeah, and the players he names, they're not small time. We're talking the Dutch government, medical professionals, even, get this, the royal family.
It's wild. I mean, when you read through his story, you start to wonder, right? Like, how much power do institutions really have to control people's lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? Smedema himself, he was a successful businessman, active in his community. Seems like he lived a pretty normal life, at least at first.
Yeah, normal until he meets this woman named Vici. He describes their first encounter like something out of a romance novel.
Yep.
You know, chance meeting, instant connection, all that.
A whirlwind romance. Sounds almost too good to be true.
Right, and maybe it was. Smedema talks about this moment of intense eye contact they had, like their souls were merging into one.
Ooh, setting us up for a big fall, perhaps.
Exactly, like he's laying the groundwork for how dramatically his world is about to change. But, even in those early days, there are these hints of something darker brewing.
Like what?
Well, he talks about these strange incidents early on in their relationship. Things that just didn't add up, left him feeling confused and manipulated. Like Vijay would disappear for hours, no explanation. Or he'd catch her with other men.
Oh, that'll plant a seed of doubt pretty quickly.
It did. Eroded his trust, big time. And then there's this story about Vijay renting a room from a guy named Jan van Beek.
Van Beek. What's his role in all of this?
Well, Smedema claims that Van Beek was basically using Vijay for sex in exchange for reduced rent. Maybe even drugging her to keep her compliant.
Whoa, that takes things to a whole new level.
Right. And here's where this manipulation thing gets really interesting. Smedema starts to describe these times when he felt slow, disoriented, almost like he was drugged himself. He'd have these memory lapses, couldn't remember what he'd been doing or where he'd been.
Sounds like he's slipping into a state of paranoia.
Yeah, maybe. But he tells us one story. It's really unsettling. He was with Vijay and a friend, and they bump into this woman who accuses Vijay of having an affair with some guy at a motel.
Oh man, that's gotta be awkward.
Totally. Vijay denied it, of course, but it really shook Smedema up, especially with those memory lapses and the feeling that he wasn't in control of his own mind.
It's like that nightmare scenario where you're losing your grip on reality and everyone else is in on it.
Right. You start to question everything, even your own perceptions. And in Smedema's case, these anxieties, they just kept getting worse as the relationship went on. They get married, have their first child, but his suspicions about Vijay, they just keep growing.
So more strange behavior, more memory gaps.
Yep. He describes all these incidents, like this time with a guy named Hans van der Heide. Vichy disappears with him for hours. Then there's this other thing. Construction workers at their house. Vichy claims one of them assaulted her.
That's awful. Did she report it to the police?
That's the thing. It's not clear. Smedema just mentions it in passing, as if it's another piece of this puzzle he's trying to solve.
Okay, so he's seeing patterns, connections where maybe there aren't any.
Right. And then there's this really bizarre episode on a boat trip with a guy named Jop Duis.
Duis? That name sounds familiar.
He's going to be a big part of this story. This boat trip, it's like something out of a David Lynch film. Smedema says he felt drugged, manipulated completely at Duis's mercy.
So the feeling of being controlled, it's escalating.
Big time. We're seeing this recurring pattern. Vichy acting suspicious, Smedema feeling drugged and manipulated, and this overwhelming sense that he's lost control of his own life.
It's like he's trapped in a web of deception, but he doesn't know who the spider is.
Exactly. So what does he do? He starts looking for answers, desperately, goes to doctors, even tries hypnosis, hoping to recover those lost memories.
Makes sense. If you feel like pieces are missing, you try to find them.
Right. And along the way, he claims to have uncovered all these documents and agreements made without his knowledge, like contracts signed in his name, financial transactions he doesn't remember authorizing.
So now it's not just personal betrayal, it's financial too.
It's like his whole life is being manipulated, and he's just starting to realize it. And then, to make things even worse, he starts losing jobs, one after another.
Seriously, how many are we talking?
At least 3, maybe more. And each time, it's under these suspicious circumstances, like he's being forced out. Smedema believes it's all connected to this shadowy network that's closing in on him.
So he's lost his wife, his finances, his career. This is getting really dark.
It is. And it's about to get even darker. Because Smedema, he doesn't stop there. He goes from feeling personally betrayed to believing there's this massive conspiracy at play. We're talking a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of power in the Netherlands.
Wait, hold on. He thinks this goes all the way to the top.
He does. In fact, he claims there's this secret law, a decree issued by Queen Juliana herself, that protects certain individuals from prosecution.
Whoa, a secret royal decree. That's a huge claim.
It is. And we're going to unpack all of that plus a lot more in part 2. Okay, so we left off with this bombshell. A secret royal decree that supposedly shields powerful individuals from the law.
Right, you can see how this idea takes root in Smedema's mind. I mean, he's desperate for an explanation, right? Why are the people he's accusing seemingly getting away with all this?
Makes sense. But a secret decree, I mean, that's a pretty bold claim. Does he have any actual proof of this thing?
Well, not a physical copy, no. But Smedema insists on it, says it's the only way to make sense of why these people have never been held accountable.
So he doesn't have a smoking gun, but he's convinced it's out there somewhere.
Exactly. And remember, this whole idea of manipulation, control, it goes way back for Smedema. He claims his brother, Johan, a lawyer, actually forced him to sign a document back in 1973.
Forced him? What kind of document?
It essentially gave Johan power of attorney over Hans's affairs. Smedema believes this was part of the plan all along to control his life, his finances, everything.
So a way to silence him before he even knew he needed silencing.
Right. And he describes a later conversation with Johan where Johan basically admits the document exists but refuses to discuss it further.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire. That would make anyone suspicious.
Absolutely. But again, it's Smedema's word against his brothers. We're in this murky territory of interpretation.
Right, it makes it hard to know what to believe. But Smedema, he does offer up a few things he considers hard evidence. Well, there's this incident where he was flying over his own house and took a picture. He says the photo showed yacht duties, remember the guy from the boat trip, engaging in sexual activity with Vizio right on Duge's lawn.
Hold on. Wasn't Smedema claiming his children were involved with Duge's too? Is he saying his kids were part of this?
Yeah, that's exactly what he says. He believes his children, at Duge's direction, deleted the photo from his camera and his email. And it gets even more complicated because he also alleges that his children falsified DNA tests.
DNA tests? To what end?
Smedema claims the tests were manipulated to hide the fact that he wasn't their biological father.
Whoa. Okay, now we're dealing with multiple layers of alleged deception here. It's hard to keep track. So he's saying Vichy was having children with other men while they were married, and everyone around him, even his own kids, were in on it. I mean, that's a pretty extreme claim, even for Smedema.
It is.
Yeah.
And he doesn't hold back on naming names. He accuses his entire family, medical professionals, even high-ranking government officials, all part of this elaborate scheme to control his life and silence him. Wow. Okay. So we've got a whole cast of characters supposedly involved in this conspiracy. But the big question remains, why? Why target Hans Smedema? What's the motive?
It all comes back to power, doesn't it? Smedema believes he stumbled onto something he shouldn't have seen. He claims these individuals were involved in all sorts of illegal activities, sexual abuse, maybe even human trafficking.
Okay, so they need to keep him quiet to protect themselves, to keep their secrets hidden.
Exactly. He sees himself as a whistleblower, a truth teller who became a threat to a corrupt system, and his actions kind of back that up, don't they?
What do you mean?
Smedema went to extreme lengths to be heard. He went to the United States 5 separate times seeking asylum. He filed complaints with international organizations like the UN Human Rights Council and the European Parliament. He even hired private investigators.
Wow, he really pulled out all the stops.
He did. Smedema even claims that former President Obama, before leaving office, filed a complaint on his behalf with the UN Human Rights Council. He describes it as State America against State Netherlands.
Former President Obama. Wow, that's a pretty big claim. But, has he offered any proof to support it?
Nothing concrete yet.
So we're left with Smedema's word and a whole lot of questions. We've got this mix of circumstantial evidence, bold claims, and of course that deafening silence from the people and institutions he accuses. It's a lot to unpack, for sure.
It really is. But, even if we approach Smedema's claims with a healthy dose of skepticism, there are still some important takeaways here. I mean, the idea that someone could feel this targeted, this powerless against forces they can't even see, it's pretty disturbing, right?
Absolutely. And it raises questions about how we deal with allegations like these, how we ensure accountability, especially when those accused hold positions of power and influence.
That's a crucial point. Because the silence, the lack of any official response, it just feeds into the suspicion, right? Makes it seem like there's something to hide.
Exactly. And this lack of transparency, it's not just about Smedema's case. It speaks to a broader concern about how those in power operate, how they respond to criticism, and whether they're truly accountable to the people they're supposed to serve.
You're right. It's a reminder that we can't just take things at face value, that we have to be willing to dig deeper, to ask questions, and to demand answers, even or especially when those answers might be uncomfortable.
So where do we go from here? We spent a lot of time exploring Smedema's perspective, the evidence he presents, but we'd be remiss if we didn't at least try to look at the other side of the story, right?
Absolutely. In our final part, we'll delve into what we know or don't know about how the people and institutions Smedema accuses have responded or not responded to these serious allegations.
We've been deep in the weeds with Hans Smedema's story, his claims of this massive conspiracy working against him. Powerful people pulling strings, silencing dissent, manipulating everything.
It's a lot to absorb, right? This feeling that institutions, the very systems meant to protect us, can actually be used to control and silence individuals.
It is. But we've mostly focused on Smedema's perspective. What about those he's accusing? The Dutch government, medical professionals, the royal family, what's their side of the story?
That's where it gets even more interesting, in a way. The most striking thing is the almost total silence from those Smedema names. Like the Dutch government, they've never officially addressed his claims. No investigations, no statements, no rebuttals, nothing.
You'd think with allegations this serious there'd be some kind of response. Corruption, abuse of power, human trafficking. You'd think they'd want to clear their name.
You would, wouldn't you? But it's this wall of silence. It makes you wonder, is it deliberate, like a strategy? Hoping it'll all just blow over if they ignore it.
Could be. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they're just being cautious, afraid of giving Smedema's claims more legitimacy by responding.
It's possible, but, whatever the reason, this silence, it's not exactly helping. Just adds to the mystery, plays right into Smedema's whole cover-up narrative.
Exactly. And it's not just the government, right? This silence, it extends to those medical professionals Smedema accuses too.
Right, like Professor Anno Vanderhart.
Yeah, this guy Smedema says was involved in brainwashing and drugging him. Pretty heavy stuff. Vanderhart's a respected figure, published all these books on trauma and dissociation. You'd think he'd want to defend his reputation.
You'd assume so. But he stayed quiet. No public statements, no denials, nothing.
Which, again, just raises more questions, right? Is it a legal strategy? Or is there something else going on here?
Hard to say for sure, but it does make you think about power dynamics, How tough it can be to challenge someone in a position of authority, especially when they just refuse to engage.
It's like they're operating on a different set of rules.
Yeah.
Untouchable.
Right. And what about the royal family? They're right at the heart of Smedema's conspiracy theory. He's claiming they issued this secret decree, remember, to protect all those involved in these alleged illegal activities.
I mean, if someone accused me of something like that, I'd be shouting from the rooftops, trying to clear my name. You'd think the royal family would have something to say about it.
You would, but nope. Total silence from them, too. Smedema even claims that King Willem Alexander stepped in personally to block his asylum request in the U.S.
No way.
That's what Smedema says. But again, no confirmation, no denial from the royal family.
It's like they think if they just ignore it, it'll go away.
But you know what they say, right? Silence implies consent. At least that's how a lot of people interpret it.
It's true. And, it kind of makes you wonder about the bigger picture. If you're powerful enough, do you really get to just ignore accusations? What does that say about accountability?
Exactly. What message does that send to people who might want to speak out, to whistleblowers?
So where does this leave us? Smedema's got his story, compelling as it may be.
Yeah.
There's some circumstantial evidence, sure, but lots of gaps, lots of unanswered questions. And then we've got this wall of silence from the people and institutions he accuses. The whole thing is unsettling, to say the least.
It is unsettling, and I think it highlights the importance of critical thinking, right? We can't just accept things at face value. We have to be willing to question, to dig deeper, to consider different perspectives, especially when power is involved.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that truth is messy. It's complicated. And sometimes, even when we think we have all the pieces, there's still something missing. This deep dive, it hasn't given us easy answers. If anything, it's left us with even more questions about truth, about power, about how we hold those in power accountable.
And that's okay. I think those are the questions we should be asking. Questions that push us to be more discerning, more critical, more aware of the ways that power can be used and abused.
It's about recognizing that sometimes the most important stories are the ones that remain untold, the voices that are silenced, the truths that are buried deep beneath layers of deception and denial. Those are the stories that deserve our attention. The ones that force us to confront uncomfortable realities, to challenge the systems that perpetuate injustice.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for diving deep with us, everyone. And remember, never stop questioning, never stop seeking truth, and never, ever be afraid to speak truth to power.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.